Okay, welcome to MailChimp campaigns. This is the second webinar in our MailChimp series. Again, just kind of covering Zoom. If you're unfamiliar with this as a platform, if my video is in your way in the upper right-hand corner, you can click on it and move it around. Otherwise, it could be docked at the top of your screen. If you have any questions or comments throughout this webinar, if you'll go ahead and put those into the chat window, that's going to be the best way to interact with us. And Michelle Foster will make sure that I see those questions, or she will answer them herself. Again, this webinar will be recorded today, so if you need to go back and watch anything or slow anything down, you'll be able to do that. We'll try to get the recording to you either by the end of today or by the end of this week. You can change the privacy settings on your chat window, so if you would only like to talk to myself and Michelle, make sure to make that change. Otherwise, you can also chat with everybody in the session. So just be mindful of that as you're making your comments. Okay, today we're going to go over how to create a template, how to use that template to turn it into a campaign, and then how to send or schedule that campaign to go out to your audience or your contacts. Okay, before we do that, I'm going to switch over to, again, the resource page for these webinars. This, again, is probably where you registered for this webinar. Again, you want to go to the Read More, where there's going to be more resources. We had a couple of people on the last webinar ask about outlines. This is where you get the outline for your webinar. This is also where you get an FAQ that has a lot more resources and answers to questions that we commonly get. And then you'll also see the branding guidelines on the one for this specific webinar. You're going to hear me talk a little bit about colors and fonts and logos today as we're building our template. These are buttons and links where you can go on Unity to get more information about branding guidelines and to get any of the elements or color codes or numbers that you hear me talk about today. The number codes and the colors are also in the FAQ. I realize number code probably doesn't mean very much to you right now, but hopefully it will by the end of today's session. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to MailChimp. Again, we're going to start off talking about how to create a template. The reason that you want to create a template for your newsletter is because it's going to keep you from having to do repetitive tasks over and over each time you create a newsletter. So, for example, when you create your footer content, that's where we're going to put your address, required content by MailChimp. That's where you can put a logo. That's where you can put a lot of different information that's probably going to appear in every single one of your newsletters. So instead of you having to set that up every single time, we're going to do it once, and then you'll have that as a template. We want you to create a template. Our best practice is to create a template as opposed to replicating a campaign. Again, that might not sound familiar to people who are brand new to MailChimp, but I'll talk about that again when we get over there. But the reason that you don't want to replicate a campaign instead of creating a template is because you are also creating an archive of all of your newsletters. When you start replicating your campaigns, if you share them in social media, if people go back and look at archived newsletters, it can start to mess with the formatting of your previous newsletters. It can mess up the images, it can mess up the way they appear. And so in order to have the best experience, it's best to start with a template. You can, if you've already sent out campaigns or emails, you can turn those into a template. Again, we'll show you how to do that a little bit later. So if that's what you're wanting to do, we can do that. Okay? So going into the template section of MailChimp, you're going to find Create a Template in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Again, if my video is floating, you're going to want to click on my video and drag it somewhere else because I am in that upper right-hand corner. So click Create Template. And you'll see that there are a lot of different options. We're going to recommend that you use the basic one-column template. The reason that we recommend a one-column template over one that has two columns in it is because of the way that it appears on not social media, because of the way it appears on mobile devices. Last week we talked about how 60 to 70% of people only open up their newsletters or their emails on mobile devices. So if you think about looking at a newsletter on your phone, if it has two columns, there's a chance that your partners are going to have to zoom in on your content again. And that's one of the things that we're trying to prevent. In other scenarios, the two columns sometimes get shifted to one column anyway on a mobile device. And when that happens, it can alter the formatting of your content in a way that you didn't anticipate and make it appear in an order that you didn't want it to appear in, make it appear in an order that doesn't make sense to your reader. And so the simplest and safest way to create a template and to create your newsletters is to keep them at one column. I will show you a couple of ways to kind of get around that, but again, we'll get there a little bit later in the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to click on this basic template. And we're going to start in the design phase. So the design phase is going to determine what colors and fonts are typically being used throughout your campaign and your newsletter. So we're going to start with the page. We're going to change the background to all white. The color choices I'm making are based on current Wycliffe branding colors. Again, those color codes will be in the branding guidelines that I showed you on the website, and they'll also be in that FAQ document. So both of those places will have all of those codes if you need them. Scrolling down, we're going to change the font. So there are two branded fonts in Wycliffe. One is Verdana and one is Georgia. You're free to pick whichever one you prefer. Once you've chosen one, however, we prefer you to stay with that same font throughout your entire design. Okay, and I'm going to change the font to black instead of this dark gray color. And we're just going to keep doing that over and over. So we're going to scroll down. And again, I chose Verdana, so I'm making all of them Verdana. And I'm making all of my font black. Okay. I know this is a little repetitive, but that's one of the reasons we want to create a template so that you do only have to do this once and not every time you go to create a campaign. Right. So once you have all the colors and the font choices made, I can encourage people to scroll back up just to make sure that you didn't skip one. That happens quite often. And then click Save. And then we're going to continue that. So we're going to go down to the pre-header. The pre-header is this area right here that says View this email in your browser. We don't recommend that you delete that section of your newsletter. The reason for that is there are a couple of browsers out there, or a couple of email clients, such as Outlook, that often does not show the entire newsletter on one screen. And so by leaving that link in there, it allows those people to be able to view your newsletter quite easily. Okay. So you can change that the pre-header color. I'm going to change mine to white. You are free to make that a different color. There are people who like to have it blue or red, which are two of the branded colors. You're free to do that if you like that. Again, scrolling down, we're just looking for the fonts that need to be changed over to Georgia or Verdana. And then I'm changing all the color over to black instead of various shades of gray. With the link, I am making my link black. One thing to be aware of, some people like their links to be blue. Again, you're welcome to change this to blue, and a link for the color blue is found in the FAQ on our website. Also, if you want this link, if you made this a different color, so if you made this dark blue or dark red or black or some other color that's dark, you're going to want to change this font to white, a light color, so that people are still able to read it even on that darker background. And so once you have all of that set, you go ahead and click Save. And then we're going to move down to the header. Again, we're just doing that same thing over and over again. We're looking for all the places where we can change the font to our preferred font and the color to our preferred color. Okay. Here I'm going to change my link to the Wycliffe blue. It's not all that different than the blue that's already there. It's just a slightly lighter colored blue. And that's all there is to the heading. The next is the body. And again, same thing. Again, I'm going to change this to Wycliffe blue. And click Save. The next is the footer. So the footer is going to be this bottom portion of your newsletter. I usually change mine to a different color. Again, this is a personal preference. Okay, so I changed mine to blue. The one I sent out to my partners is usually a dark gray or a black. You're free to change that around to your preference. Of course, now you can't read the text, so not only do we want to change the font to Georgia or Verdana, but also to a color that people are going to be able to read. So I'm not going to use black for this one, but I'm going to use white. Okay, and then I need to go down and change the link as well. Okay. And once you've made those changes, go ahead and save. And then the next thing that we're going to look at is mobile styles. With mobile styles, there's different opinions about what's the best way to do this. I know there are some people who do like to alter the size of their font for mobile devices. I've never done that and haven't had a problem, but there are people who prefer that. If you're going to change the fonts for mobile devices, make sure that you're also double checking the way it looks. So if you make changes here, send test emails to your phone, look at the previews, and make sure it's doing what you're hoping for it to do. For the pre-header visibility, again, the pre-header is this portion up here. I typically hide this in the mobile view. Again, that's my personal preference. If that's something that you want to show up on people's phones and tablets, feel free to leave it there. When you've made all the changes that you want to make in this section, you can click Save. And then the last section for design is Monkey Rewards. And you'll see there's two different options for Monkey Rewards. There's a white and a black. As a user of a free account in MailChimp, you are required to have one of these. If you do not choose one, they will place one here for you. And they're going to place it right here where it says if rewards, HTML rewards, and if. That's where this is going to appear in your newsletter. So you're free to pick whichever one you prefer. Just know that one will appear there whether you select one or not. Are there any questions so far on the design? All right, so after we finish those portions, we've finished with the design phase of our newsletter or our template, and we're going to switch over to content. Okay. In content, again, the biggest, most important thing to remember for your template is this is not where we're creating your newsletter. Okay, this isn't where you want to add in all of your stories and all of your pictures, all of your links. The only things that we want to add into the template are the things that are going to appear similar every time you send out a campaign. So for example, every time I send out a campaign, my banner looks exactly the same. Since it's the exact same every time, I'm going to go ahead and add my banner into my template so that I don't have to do it every time. So to add a banner in, I would click on this place that says logo, and then we're going to use the replace link on the right. Okay, you'll notice that I already have a lot of pictures loaded into MailChimp. You probably don't if you're a first-time user. In order to upload the images into MailChimp, again, you're going to go to the upper right-hand corner where it says Upload, and it's going to let you into the file manager on your computer. From there, you select your picture, and it's going to place it into this area, this Content Manager in MailChimp. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select my banner, and then I'm going to click Insert. On the right side of the page, once it's been inserted, you'll see that it has a size. So mine is 600 by 200. You don't want that to be any smaller. I think MailChimp actually currently recommends it be 800 across. It used to be 600 across. If it's too big, MailChimp will give you a warning. If you look over on this side down here, it'll say something about image being too large. Do you want to fix it? If you click on fix it, it'll help you reduce the size of your image. Okay? You can also edit images within MailChimp. So you see on mine that I have this kind of extra large white space underneath my banner, but I would want to get rid of that. So to do that, I can use edit. And then I'm going to use this cropping tool to make it smaller. Now, right now, if I try to do it, you'll notice that it also cuts off the side of my image. In order to prevent it from doing that, you have to uncheck this little blue box right here that says lock dimensions. Once that box is unchecked, now I'm able to move this up and down. Okay, so now I can delete just the bottom and say save. And you'll see that it did go ahead and crop the white out. One thing about MailChimp is you're not going to actually create your banner inside of MailChimp. So you'll see that I have an image on top of this, the colored background, and then the words on top of that. You can't create that in MailChimp. You need to create that outside of MailChimp in Publisher or Word or PowerPoint or Canva, wherever you create things, and save it as an image there before bringing it over to MailChimp. Okay? You can't really layer images inside of MailChimp. After you have your banner, click Save and Close. And then we're going to scroll down a little bit. And we're going to take a look at each of these different content blocks over on the right. Okay. One thing to keep in mind is we don't want to keep an entire story in one text block. So for example, if you have a story that is 4 paragraphs long, you might want to put those into 4 different content blocks or 4 different text blocks. The reason that we encourage that is because if you want to go back and add a picture, so if you want to have 2 paragraphs, then a picture, and then the last 2 paragraphs, you're going to want to be able to put an image block in the middle of your story. Okay? And you can only do that if you place the paragraphs into individual text boxes. If that doesn't make sense, I'll demonstrate it as we're going along here. Okay, so the first kind of text blocks is content block is a text block. This is an example of a text block over on your left that's already here. Okay, so again, you don't necessarily need to type your story into the content block. You just need to have however many you normally would use in your newsletter. So if you normally have 2 different stories in your newsletter, you might want to bring over 2 text blocks. So this can be your second story. Okay. The next one is a boxed text. Before we go on, let me talk a little bit more about the text box. When you're editing a text box, there is a way for you to put a picture inside of the text box. We encourage you not to do that because of the way that it formats. When you place a picture into the content block, the picture is not going to let the words wrap around the image. It's just going to appear as a word. So if your image is really tall, there's going to be a lot of white space that you don't want in your sentence. There has been a couple of people who have Googled how to get around that, and there is a way to get around it, but it will also mess up the rest of your formatting. Okay, it will cause the words in the image to be right up next to each other without any white space at all. So one of my encouragements that I like to give at this point is almost everything that I show you today has some sort of workaround where you can make it do something different. However, when you do that, it almost always breaks something else in your template. So the more willing or the quicker that you're willing to work with in the way MailChimp has created things to work, the less of a headache you're going to end up giving yourself in the end. Okay, I was one of the people who, when I first started using MailChimp like 5 years ago, I wanted it to look like it looked like when I used Publisher. And so I tried to force it to do things that I wanted it to do. And I could make it do it, but it also messed up other things. Okay, So try to resist looking for workarounds and looking for ways to make it do what you want it to do. A lot of times you can find that, and it's going to mess something else up for you. Okay, and then your newsletter checker is going to say, "We need you to fix this," and you're not going to be able to. So please be careful about changing things that aren't meant to be changed. If I can say it that way. The next thing that we're going to look at is the box text. Okay, so if I drag this over, the difference is it has that gray background and the text is white. What I've seen a lot of people use this for is their prayer and praise requests or something else that they want to draw people's attention to. Okay, now again, prayer and praise requests is something that a lot of people have in every single one of their newsletters. So since it's something that's repetitive from newsletter to newsletter, it makes sense to go ahead and put that into your template. Okay, so if I go, okay, and give it a couple of bullet points. Oops. So one thing that you're seeing as I'm working with this now is it doesn't work as easily as Word does as far as text formatting. And that's just something that we encourage you to try to get used to instead of trying to do it in a different way. What I mean is if you write your newsletter, which you're free to do, if you write your newsletter in a Word editor, Word gives your text its own formatting. Okay, so it might not, if you chose Verdana or Georgia, you might be using Helvetica or Times New Roman in Word. If you bold something in Word, if you have paragraph markers in Word, if you use any sort of Word formatting, MailChimp is going to try to bring that Word formatting into its template, and it's going, in most cases, it's going to mess it up a little bit. Okay, because whatever you copy and pasted into this box isn't going to look like what this box looked like when I typed directly into it. One of the ways you can get around that, if you copy and paste text in, you can use this option here where it says paste as plain text, and it will try to strip out the formatting that was done in Word. You can also copy or highlight all of your text and click clear styles, and that will also strip out a lot of the formatting that happened in Word. But then you have to go back and put spaces in between your paragraphs and things like that. Okay, so that's just something to be aware of. If you're not going to type directly into MailChimp, just know that you're going to have to do some extra formatting when you bring it over. Okay. Now again, the reason I'm putting test is because I want it to be formatted like this every time I go to write a newsletter. But I don't need to write out my prayer requests and my praises in my template because those are going to change every time. Okay. I am going to go ahead and move these over to the left because I don't like the way they look when they're centered. Again, that's a personal preference. Now you'll notice right now, if I go to try to add a new content block, I can't find the text box, I can't find images, I can't find anything. In order to find it again, you have to hit save and close. Once you hit save and close, all these options come back. Okay. The next thing that we're going to look at is a divider. So this here is a divider, and it's just a straight line that goes all the way across the page. You can change a lot about it, including the color. Okay. And what I've seen people, it's not the color I was going for, but that'll work. These are not the colors that I would use in a typical template, just so that you're aware of that. I'm just letting whatever color comes up come up so that you guys don't watch me fight with the colors for long periods of time. Okay. What I've seen people use these for is to divide stories. So for example, if I want to have a story up here, just a line break, and then a news story, that's one way to visually indicate to your readers that you started the next section of your newsletter. Okay. You can do these lines in fancier ways. So there are some options that they give you as far as different line styles. Okay, so you can choose different styles. You can make them wider, that sort of thing. You can also grab a pattern bar from Unity, which is something that is linked on our webpage. Again, the webpage, it has the branding resources. You can grab one of those, and they're more decorative lines that you can put across your screen. If you decide to do that, you will not use the divider, but you'll use the image content block instead, because that's how those are saved onto your computer. So if you want to add a picture, this is the best way to do it. Is to grab the image content block, drag it over to your newsletter, and then add an image in. Now you're going to add the image the exact same way that we added the banner earlier. The only difference is it's not necessarily important for you to add the image here. So we have the image holder in our format, but it's okay to not include a picture at this stage because, again, this is your template. So you're probably going to use a different picture every single time. So our goal in using these content blocks and our template is to make it look like it's typically going to look. So if I usually have a scripture impact story on the top and a personal story on the bottom, and I like to have an image underneath my scripture impact story, then this is how I would set it up. So then when I go to write my newsletter, I have to make minimal changes to the formatting of my newsletter. All I have to do is put in the content and I'm ready to go. Okay, so that's the goal in setting up your template. The next thing that we can look at is an image group. The image group allows you to have multiple images side by side. Okay, now again, I warned you earlier, if you use something like this that makes it appear that there are two columns on a mobile view, there's a good chance that this is going to be shifted so that the images are on top of each other instead of side by side. So if it's important what order these images come in, be mindful of that and make sure you do some test emails before you send it out to make sure that the images are in the order that you want. The second thing to keep in mind is that it's really not a best practice to add lots and lots of images to your emails, nor is it good to add lots of buttons and links. The more things like that you add, the more likely it is that email clients are going to think that your newsletter is spam, okay? The more likely you make your newsletter look like a typical email, so maybe one or two pictures, maybe. Okay, you don't, one or two pictures, one button, maybe two buttons. That's about all the fancy stuff you really want to put in there. Otherwise, it starts getting too complicated and they think that you're trying to send spam. Okay, it's like if you think of emails that are sent from people who are selling things, they have lots and lots of images. The email's really, really long. They have lots and lots of links. So that's why they think that's what you're doing if you add too much of this kind of stuff in. Okay, it is okay to add some, just don't go overboard with it. Again, to add the images side by side, again, you're just going to click Browse. It's going to take you to your file manager, and you're going to use that to choose your images to place in here. Again, be mindful of how big those images are. If this image is okay to be 800 across, it's not okay for both of these to be 800 across. Right? You'd want them to be about 350 across, 350 pixels maximum. So what I'm talking about across is this number right here. You want this first number right here not to be more than about 300 for each of these side-by-side images. Okay, otherwise it starts messing with the way it appears in some people's browsers. All right, go ahead and delete this out of here. The next we're going to look at is the image card. The image card gives you a picture with this black portion underneath. So it looks like the box text that we use for our prayer and praise requests. This is if you want to have a picture with a caption. So if you put an image in and you need to give credit to somebody or you want to give a short description of what this image is, then this is a way that you can do that easily. Okay. The next one is image and caption, which is very similar to what we just looked at, except instead of it being black, it's white. Okay, so again, you can use this to create a caption or to give a brief description of your image. This is one of the ways also that you can have an image and text side by side, so you can force it to appear like a two-column newsletter. To do that, you go over to settings, and instead of the caption position being on the bottom, we're going to switch it to being to the left or to the right. Now again, you can also make the picture bigger or smaller. Okay, so I can switch it to 1/3, 2/3. You can change the size however you like, but again, keep in mind, when you use this, or if you do it like this, when it goes onto a mobile device, it's going to flip it up and down again, okay? So the only way that you're actually changing this for somebody who's doing it is if they open it on their computer, the desktop computer or a laptop computer. They have a smaller screen, it's still gonna appear as one column. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're doing this. Also, if you decide to do this way, a best practice for editing the content is to stop at the bottom of the picture. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. Now this is a bunch of gibberish, but okay. So best practices would be to stop right here, because if I continue, or even that's okay, but if I continue, you'll see that the text keeps going down and it leaves this white space underneath my image. We don't want you to do that. So if you have if it's longer, if your text is longer than that, go ahead and still stop at the bottom of the picture, click Save and Close, and then drag a new text box just underneath, and then continue your story here. Okay, so then if they're looking at it on a laptop, it'll just appear like it's the story started here and continued here, like it would in Word or Publisher. Okay, so it gives the appearance that you've done just one text block and wrapped the words around it. Again, on a mobile device, it's going to stack all of these elements, so you do need to check and make sure it appears the way that makes sense to your reader. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The next thing that we're going to look at is the social. We're going to skip the social share buttons and we're going to go to the social follow buttons. The social share buttons give a way for partners to share your content on their social media. So if you were to use the social share and somebody clicked on the Facebook icon, what would happen is it would open up their Facebook and give them an opportunity to post your newsletter to their page. So if you're interested in that, or you have advocates that are willing to do that, feel free, of course, to set these up. The way you set it up is very similar to the way I'm going to set this up. So you'll still get the information for both. Okay? I'm going to grab social follow and drag it over to the left. Well, I'm not going to actually drag it because it's already here. Okay, so where you see the little Twitter icon, the Facebook icon, and then the link icon, those are your social follow buttons. If you're going to leave them here, we need to edit them. If you want to get rid of them completely, you can use the delete button. You can also leave them where they are in the footer, or you can bring them into the body of your email. I like to do that just because I like them to be on the white background, but that's, again, your preference. Or if you want to have a different color than what your footer is, you would also need to drag it up like this. Okay, so once you have them located in the place that you want them to be, go ahead and click on it, and then there are some changes that we need to make. The first is picking which social media you want people to be able to be taken to. So again, this is taking them to your account, not to their own account. So if you want somebody to go to your Twitter account, you can leave this here, and then you want to go to your Twitter feed, get the URL, and put that here, okay? If you just leave this here by itself, it's going to take people to their own Twitter feeds instead of to your Twitter page. Same thing with Facebook, okay? So if I switch this to Facebook, I know that I have two Facebooks now, but I've done that on purpose. You don't want to leave this as just facebook.com. You want to go to your Facebook profile and get the URL so people are being taken to your Facebook page. If you're a married couple, you can have two Facebooks, just like you're seeing here. But what we encourage you to do is to put the person's name next to the button. So for example, if this was Bob's Facebook, I would say, follow Bob on Facebook. Or you could just put Bob's Facebook or something. It doesn't have to be my wording, but just indicate to people whose account they're going to go look at. All right, so then if this was the wife's, maybe it's Jan's Facebook. Okay, and then again, you have to make this URL go to Jan's Facebook profile, and this one go to Bob's Facebook profile. I know you can't see the text on the left yet, but we're going to make a change here in a few minutes that's going to allow you to see it. Okay, so we're just setting this up first. Then you can choose to change this one as well. So if you have your own, if you have a missionary website, if you have a personal missionary page that you want to have put on here, if you have an Instagram account, we really only encourage you to grab the social media accounts that are really going to be relevant to your Wycliffe ministry. So I have an Instagram account, but I use my Instagram account for art. I do not use it for my ministry, so I do not link my Instagram in my MailChimp. Okay? So it's really only helpful to your PD or to your Wycliffe ministry if you actually use these accounts for your Facebook ministry, for your Wycliffe ministry, or to connect with your partners. Okay, so if you're using them for those, then it makes sense to include them here. If you only have 2, you can, of course, delete one by using that minus sign. If you have 5, you can add another service and keep adding them until you have as many as you want. You'll notice that email is one of the options. So I've seen a couple of people set this up so it says, send me your prayer request. And then they'll put their email address right here. So that's a clickable button. You're, of course, free to do that. Again, you can do that for both husband and wife if you like. If you have a joint email account, just use one. That's your personal preference. Okay. One thing about these buttons is that you should not expect a lot of engagement with the buttons. Okay, so for example, the story that I always share is that I had a partner that was very, very invested in my Wycliffe ministry. She read every newsletter. She was at every meeting that we had. She was constantly praying for me. She was a financial partner. She was just invested in every way that she could be invested. But it took her 5 years to notice that I had a LinkedIn button as one of my social media buttons at the bottom of my newsletter. Okay, and that's because I don't talk about these buttons in the body of my message. Okay, so if people are not engaging with these buttons at the bottom of your newsletter, it's very likely that most people don't even know they're there. Okay, if you have something like this that you want to make sure that people see, you're probably going to have to point it out in the body of your message in order for people to see them and interact with them. Okay. Now, you can make some changes past what we've already done. By the first, we're going to go into style, and you can change the background. So I said, maybe you want to have a different color than your footer. This is a place where you could do that. Okay, so if you want this to be some other color, you could do that. You can also use color codes to change the background instead of the click and drag like I just did. You can give it a border if you like. So again, you can change the shape of the border. If you pick a border, it will give you the option to change the color of it. Font, again, you want to change this to either Georgia or Verdana based on what you chose earlier when we were doing the design phase. And then I'm going to change the color of the font that I'm going to use. Again, you don't see the font right now, but you will. Because I have that dark background, I want to make sure that I have a light colored font. So I'm going to change my color to white to make sure that people can read it. Now switching over to settings, you can change the way that the icons look. So these are colored icons that a lot of people are familiar with. Oh, that's not what I thought I was changing. What I was about to talk about was something else. So you can do icon only, you can do text only. Okay, so these are the words that we typed in next to each of the social media icons on the content page. Or you can change it to both icon and text. This is typically the one that we recommend because most people recognize what those little icons mean. And then we also want the text there so that they know what that icon's going to be for in this newsletter. Okay, so if you have a husband and wife's Facebook, you want to have that text there so people know whose Facebook they're clicking on. Okay. You can make it full width or fit to size. You'll notice, look at the very edges of the rectangle to see the change. Okay, so full width. So if I only had 2 on this, then if I said fit to size, it would bring the colored portion, colored background closer into the middle of the page. If I do it full width, it's going to make it stretch all the way across. Again, that's a personal preference, whichever one you think appears better for your content. Okay, layout. This is the one that we're at right now, the one that's the most black. So they're side by side right now. You can make them look like a list. You can make the icons bigger with the words underneath. Okay, it seems like different people have different preferences on how they want that to look. This is the one that I typically stick with, but again, go with one that you think looks best for your stuff, for your content and your partners. Icon style. You'll see that there's several different styles that you can try out. Again, you don't want black icons on a black background. Okay, so you do need to use color or white if you have a darker background. The big thing about these, again, this is why we're putting it in your template, is we don't want to change this from newsletter to newsletter. It's an item that we want to look similar across all of our content. And so choose one that you're comfortable with. There's also an outline version, and so you have lots of different options on how to do this. And then once you've chosen your favorite one, click Save and Close. Okay, that's what you do with this, the social follow content. If you delete it and want it back, this is how you add it back into your template. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? Okay, I just now saw that Michelle has been muted this whole time, so I'm going to be switching that back on so that she can share whatever questions I've been missing. Apologize for that. That's happened to us a couple of times now. Give me just a second while I figure that out. Okay, Michelle, you should be able to talk to me now.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So we've had some questions come through. I've been answering most of them privately in chat because they're pretty specific. Okay. But where you were talking about the social stuff there, we had a question earlier that came in before the webinar started about sharing both people's emails. So could you just show how you would enter that in the social bar? You had both Facebooks.
Sure. Okay, so to do both emails, you do it the same way that I did 2 Facebooks. So I would go in, add another service, and then change it to email. Okay, so now I have email 1, email 2. Now the link text, okay, we would say, okay, you don't have to say it how I'm saying it. You can say email Bob, Bob's email, send Bob an email. Say however you want to say it. I'm just giving you some sample text to put in there. And then you're going to want to put in each person's email address. Okay, so, and then do the same thing for Jan. Okay. Okay, and that'll give you both emails. Is there anything else, Michelle, that I need to answer? Okay. You're muted again. Okay. I don't know why it's doing that.
Okay. So what you're, there's, just so you know, when you're unmuting me, it's actually asking me to let you unmute me, so you're doing something different than normal here. But we have another question. Selecting social follow, and yet when dragging and dropping that, he's not seeing the icons like you've shown. So not sure. He's selecting social follow, and then when he dragged and dropped that onto his template, he's not seeing the icons like you showed and wanted to know where he might be going wrong.
Okay. If they're not appearing like this, it would probably be something that we need to figure out in a one-on-one meeting. Because I'm not sure, to be quite honest.
Also, another question, do you recommend putting follow Wycliffe on Facebook on your social bar?
If you want to, it's a personal preference. If you want Wycliffe's information on there, you're free to include that.
Okay. And I know that you briefly touched on this, but can you just remind people what the MailChimp rewards are again, please?
Sure. So the MailChimp rewards is back in the design phase. And it's these 2 icons down here. I mean, I don't know what its function is. I don't know if you do, Michelle. I don't know its function. I just know that it's an item that is required to be included in all free accounts. So since we don't pay for MailChimp is sort of like MailChimp advertising, basically.
Yeah, it is. It's just a little tagline at the bottom where if people wanted to use MailChimp, it's letting people know that you're using MailChimp. So it's kind of a self-promotion. And if someone wanted to start using MailChimp, they could click that. It would link them to MailChimp's default page where they could set up an account.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I think I fixed your settings, Michelle, to be able to mute and unmute. So
oh, good.
I think. So hopefully all of that is working now.
I'll change my name back to my own name then.
Okay. All right. So apologize for the extra muting. I don't know. I'm sure I did something to cause it, but I don't know what it was. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to look at is buttons. So buttons are basically like hyperlinks, but they look like a button instead of a link. There's a lot of things that you can use buttons for. One of the things that we encourage people to use buttons for is a PDF copy of your newsletter. And the reason that we encourage that is because we have a lot of churches. I kind of mentioned this last week in last week's webinar. We have a lot of churches who really want to have that PDF version so they can print it out for the church. They want to print it out to hang it up on the refrigerator, or however it is that they use it. Now, again, MailChimp does not create the PDF for you. That's something that a lot of people don't like about MailChimp. However, MailChimp is not for missionaries. It's actually for people who are doing e-commerce. And so those people are not trying to make print. The people who pay for MailChimp are not trying to make printed versions of their information. So that's why that's not really a tool that MailChimp has tried to create for us. Okay, so to create that PDF version, you do it the way you have traditionally, whether that's a Publisher or Word or a Mac program, okay, and then save that to your computer. And then to include the PDF, you would click on your button, and then where it says a link to web address, you would change this over to File. Okay, and you'll see it's taking me to my content manager again, and I can upload a file. When you upload a file, it's going to look like this in MailChimp, and you would just select that and add it to, and click Insert, and that would put it underneath your button. Okay, that's how you essentially attach a document to your MailChimp email. You can also use buttons for your personal missionary page. Okay, so maybe you want to say, again, you want to say Wycliffe Ministry, not my ministry, not partner with me, not partner with us. It has to be Wycliffe Ministry, and it has to be that because of IRS regulations. So in order to keep our non-for-profit status, in order not to get your partners in trouble if you were ever audited, you need to be using that wording. Okay? Now, if you're going to use your personal missionary page, you would go to your personal missionary page, grab the URL. This needs to be web address, and then you just paste the URL in here. Okay, so I have mine saved right here. So I would just place that in here, and then click Save and Close, and now this is clickable. Now you can make other changes to the button. So you can change the way the button looks by going to Style. You can give it a border if you like, okay? And then you can change the color of the border. You can round the corners more or less if you want. You can change the color of it. So if you're using the Wycliffe branded colors, you could change that to one of those colors, which is what I'm going to do. Okay. Again, you want to look at the font. So again, the font is not one of the fonts that I chose. I chose Verdana. Right, so you can change all that and then go over to settings. You can change the width. So some people really like buttons to be all the way across the page. Some people think that doesn't look like a button and I want it to fit the text. Okay, personal preference, choose whichever one fits you best, and then click Save and Close, and now you have a button. Now again, this is one of those things that you don't want to have 8 buttons in your newsletter. Okay, so I have seen people who will put their personal missionary page, a link to their website, a link to a song they like, a link to a video, a link to a book on Amazon, and something else. Okay, so they have a huge stack of buttons going down their page. The problem with that is that it's going to make it more likely for your email to be thought of as spam by different email clients. Okay, so with buttons, they're going to have 1 or 2, but you really don't want to have that gigantic list of buttons stacked on top of each other. Okay. The next thing that we're looking at is the footer. The footer tends to be the most complicated for a lot of people, so I'm going to try to go over it slowly. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this line. That is a personal preference of mine. I just don't like it. If you want to leave it there, you're free to do so. But one thing I want you to look at right away is the merge tags. A merge tag is the asterisk, so where you see asterisk, straight up and down line, capital letters, straight up and down line, asterisk. Do not delete any of those. Okay? If you start deleting those, MailChimp can suspend your account and no longer allow you to use it. Don't type into these things. Okay, so where it says current year, you're not meant to type 2019. You're meant to leave it exactly the way it is, and it will change once you build your campaign with it. Okay? When you do a preview of this information, if you're doing a preview of your template, it will not change to fill in that information. The only time it's going to change, so when it's going to add your address, it's going to add the current year, it's going to add that information, but only when you're building a campaign and you've told it what audience you want to send it to, because this information can be made specific to specific audiences. Now with a free account, you can only have one, so that might not make sense, but it has made sense in the past. Or if you have a paid account and you've paid to have more than one audience, it's going to make sense for those people. But once you've designated who you're sending it to in a campaign, then this information will fill in when you do a preview, okay? So it will not change while you're in template mode, or if you send a test email from your template, it will not change, okay? I know I'm saying that over and over, but it's because lots and lots of people forget that, okay? It will not change. And I'm gonna go ahead and click on this. Again, you have to keep this information here, but you can change this where it says our mailing address. You can go ahead and change that to my if you're not married, so that you're not making yourself a plural. These links have to stay here. Now you can add things to your footer, and a lot of people do. And so you can add things like phone numbers. You can add email addresses if you don't like these buttons and you just want to type out your email address. You're free to do that in the footer. If you want to add a Wycliffe logo, if you're using your newsletters for partnership development, you need to include the statement that says, please, if sending in a check to Wycliffe, right, please fill out a separate note indicating that it's preference for the Wycliffe Ministry of, and I'll show you that wording in a minute, and that's also included in the FAQs, but you would need to include that statement. You need to include Wycliffe's address. So this is going to auto-fill in your personal address, but you also want to have Wycliffe's address on there. So that's all stuff that we're going to add to the footer. There's two ways to do it. You can either just hit the enter key. If you're going to keep it one column for this, I would probably do it up here and leave this stuff at the bottom. So include your phone numbers, include your logo, whatever you want to include. This is the one area where I actually set it up to be 2 columns. Now it doesn't change what I've told you in the past. So I'm making it 2 columns. If it's on a mobile device, it is going to shift to 1 column still. I go ahead and make it 2 columns because if somebody is using a laptop or a computer, it just makes it easier to see it all at once. And then I just keep in mind that it is going to shift it to be on top of each other in mobile view. So you can do it however you like, just letting you know this is why I do it the way I'm about to show you. So I'm going to change it to 2 columns. I'm going to do that by going over to settings and switching down to 2 columns. Now you'll notice that they duplicated the information from 1 column to the next. You can delete it on one side. You just can't delete it on both sides. Okay? To switch back and forth between the columns, you're going to use this column 1, column 2 at the top of the screen. Where some people have gotten confused in the past is when you click down to start making edits, sometimes this disappears or looks like it's gone. So just remember that that happens and that you just need to scroll up higher. Okay? That's happened to more people than you might think. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so the next thing, so now that we have 2, I'm going to switch over to the second column, and I'm going to delete all the content in the second column. Okay. Do we have any questions?
Yep, we just got one. Just said something about my email address is, and the template, someone's using your template number 3, and it doesn't say that in that template. Can you go over how to add that, or will it need to be something you need to show me individually?
So not my email addresses, but my mailing address is. Is that in the template that you have? So that's what I was referring to, was right here. Because then single individuals don't want it to say our. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. Let me know if that doesn't answer your question, though.
All right, we don't have anything in yet, so go ahead.
Okay, so in the second column, that's where I'm going to go ahead and add the other content that I was talking about previously. So to do that, I'm just copying and pasting. So I'm copying and pasting over checks can be made payable to, and then Wycliffe's address, and then the information about the separate note. Okay, underneath that, I'm going to put my logo. Now, previously, I told you we're not going to include pictures inside of text boxes. That is true for the entire body of your newsletter. Okay? For the entire body of your newsletter, you're going to use an image content block. However, for your footer, you cannot put an image content block inside of your footer. So this is the one time we're going to break that rule and go ahead and use this image icon to insert the image. Okay, so I already have my logo preloaded. This is one of the things that you can get off of Unity, and it's going to be in those branding guidelines, and it's also going to be in the FAQ on the resource website. Okay, so those are places where you can find these. I'm going to choose that. I'm going to say insert, and you're going to see that it's way, way, way too big to go into my newsletter. So I'm going to reduce this down to 150. Now, not everybody agrees about what size they want the logo to be. So I would encourage you to go ahead and pick a smaller size, see what it looks like. So go ahead and save and insert. And then if this is too small for you, you're going to double click on that image, and it's going to let you change the size again. Okay, so you might have to play with it a little bit to get it the exact size that you want, but that's the way that you can do that. Okay, so that's all that we're going to show about the footer. The other thing that I like to show people how to include in their template is their signature. So if you want to include a signature into your template, again, that might be a good idea because that's something that you do over and over. Okay, so we're going to drag this over. Before I go into this, I do want to point out that if you're expecting this webinar to be only 1 hour, we are only 4 minutes away from 1 hour. So if you need to leave, feel free to go ahead and do so. Remembering that this is a recording, so you'll still get all the information later when we are able to email this out. We will in the future start publicizing this as a longer webinar so that people know that it is a longer period of time. So I apologize for that. So again, to set up your signature, okay, so this is just what I put in all of mine. So maybe you say thank you or sincerely or whatever you put there. And then I typically move mine over to the right, which is fighting me right now for some reason. There we go. And then to put in a signature, what I do is I just add an image. And so again, we're going to use, this is the other time that I'm breaking my rule, as I'm grabbing this as an image. And then I'm using this. So this isn't a handwritten signature. This is just a fancy font that I chose. I'm going to click insert. And again, this needs to be made fairly small. Okay, I'm going to save and insert the image. And now I have a signature in my template. Okay, so if that's something you want to do, that's how you go about that. That's all there is for the template. So the template is complete. Again, you can go ahead and do some tests if you want, but it's not going to look like a campaign, right? It's not going to fill in your footer information. You don't need to have all your stories and images in here. This is just so that when you go to write your newsletter, as much is done already as humanly possible so that you have a minimum amount of work to do when you go to do your newsletter. Okay, so once this is set up, we're going to click Save and Exit. We're going to give our template a name. It doesn't matter what you call it. Nobody will see it but you. Just make it something that is going to help you when you go to use it in the future. Okay. So that takes us out of the template screen. And then we're going to move over to the campaign screen. And what I'm going to show you now is how to use a template for your campaign. Okay, so in order to do that, MailChimp, for whatever reason, creates a first campaign for you. And I always just delete that. And so to delete it, you check the box that's next to it, and then you click delete. Okay. Now I'm going to say create campaign. Choose email. And then you need to give your campaign a name. Okay. So I just chose my test campaign. Yours might be July update, newsletter, prayer letter, whatever you want to call it. And then click begin. Okay, so this is where I said that you need to tell who you're going to send it to. Once you've done this step, the footer will start filling in for this campaign. Okay, so we're going to add recipients. And you're going to choose the audience that we created in our last webinar. This is a place if you want to send to specific people. You can choose a group of, you can choose one of the tags that you've created, or you can choose people who haven't yet. So if you added new people to your list, I'm going to go ahead and save that for next week's webinar because we don't have as much content for next week. So I'll go into all of those details next week. But just keep in mind that you can send it to just part of your partners. I encourage people to personalize the to field with the first name. And that's just another safeguard against trying to get it to not be counted as spam. Okay, so go ahead and turn that on and then click save. Okay, are we getting any questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple. One is, how many templates can you make?
You can create as many as you want, as far as I know. They have not yet limited that. That's not to say that they won't in the future. But if you want to have a template for your newsletter, another one for prayer updates, another one for something else, you should be able to do that without any problem.
Mm-hmm. Another confirmation type question. The name of the campaign won't be seen by people, just the MailChimp user. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the name of the campaign will not. What they will see is a subject name that you put here. What I recommend, though, is to make the subject and the campaign name the same. And the reason for that, because I made them different at one point and got really frustrated because I couldn't find a campaign I was looking for when I went back to find it. So I encourage you to keep them the same, but no, they won't see this one, they will see this one.
Yeah, I'm going to second that thing as well. That way you won't accidentally get them mixed up either.
Truth, yeah. Anything else? All right, so we're going to go ahead and put in the subject of our newsletter. This is what your partners are going to see. Okay, so make this something relevant. I think best practices have come to say that we don't want this to be something stale. So you don't want to just put in July newsletter each time. July newsletter, August newsletter. That's there's some research out that shows that actually gets less opens than if you give it a fancier name. So like I just put together a newsletter for my partners that had a scripture impact story, and the title of my email was something like taking the word at face value, or taking the Bible at face value. And a subject like that will typically get more opens than if I just said July newsletter. Okay, people look at that to see if the content is going to be something that they're excited to read. Same thing with the preview text. So the preview text is, so if you have the subject of your newsletter, there's typically a little bit of text right underneath that subject that gives a little bit of idea of what that content is. It doesn't have to be the first line in your newsletter. I usually go through my newsletter and find a sentence that sounds kind of inspirational, but still gives an idea of what's in that newsletter and put it in there. You don't have to put anything in there. There is research that says about 24% of people decide whether or not they're going to open a newsletter based on that text. So it could help you get more opens. Again, all of this is research based on large numbers of people. So you know your partnership team better. If you know they're going to respond to certain things more than certain other things, then of course do that instead. We're just giving you sort of the best practices as shown by current research. Okay, so just keep those things in mind. I'm not going to type anything in here right now because I don't have a newsletter to base it off of. But you would want to go ahead and put something in there for the most part.
So Jen, we have a little bit of confusion about the preview line.
Yeah.
Wondering if it will show up in the body of your message prior to the campaign. Where does that show up exactly?
Yeah. Let me open my email real quick. Let me know if you can't see my email, Michelle. Do you see my email opening?
I can see it opening. It's thinking about it.
Yeah. It's going nice and slow. Okay, so in your email, you see where this says Jean Pedersen, so that's who, or like here's Janet Morrison, that's who the email's from. Authentication on MailChimp, that's the subject of the newsletter. And this right here, you see I only have 4 words, 5 words, a quick question I added. That's the preview text, okay? So some people who use, so this is Outlook, some people who have Gmail that goes all the way across their screen, and so they actually get to read a lot more of your preview text. But that's what this is, and that's the only place that shows up. So if I type this here, it's not going to be in my email. It's not going to be in the body of my message. It's just going to show up in that one place on their email list.
And I would encourage, as you just showed, not to write a paragraph there, because it will cut off in various places on various email clients. And so shorter means that people will see the whole thing.
Yeah.
Rather than just a couple words that might not make sense altogether.
Yeah, and they only give you 150 characters, so they do force you to limit it some as well. The next part is where we're actually going to start doing our content. So design email, and this is where we're going to grab the template that we created. So I'm going to go to Save Templates and click on the template that I made. Okay, and so now this is the starting point for making my newsletter. And so I'm not going to give you a lot of information here. This is where you're going to go through and start putting your content. Okay, so, and I have to change all this, otherwise it won't let me send it because they won't let you send default text. Okay, but this is where you're going to write your stories. This is where you're going to write your updates. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in the picture that I want for this specific newsletter. Okay. We're just going to go in and change all this, okay? So make sure that it's all set up and ready to send. And this is where I would go in and go ahead and type in, this is where you go ahead and type in your prayer requests and phrases. You shouldn't have to make any changes to this stuff. The button set up, the footer set up, all your links are set up. You shouldn't have to change that part. So you're just adding your stories and you're just adding your pictures. And that should be all you need to do. Okay, so once you do that, save and close. Now, if you want to add things, so in my template, I only have 2 pictures, but for this campaign, I really want 3. You can go ahead and add another picture in. I have 2 places to write my story, but I really only need 1 for this newsletter. I can go ahead and delete 1 out of here now. Okay, so again, the template is just giving you a starting place. Once you're actually building the campaign, you can go ahead and change some things around. Right. After you've done that, before you send out your campaign, you do want to do a test newsletter first. So whoever's checking your emails, if it's a launching coordinator or resource coordinator, PD coach, if you have a PD coach and a launch coordinator and a resource coordinator, so if 2 people are checking your newsletter, we ask that you send it to yourself first. So you'd go into your preview and test, send a test email and send it to you, and then forward that to your coach into your LC or RC. And that's so that the RC, LC, PD coach, so they can see that the other person received it. Okay, so do try to do that. And you just put the email address in here. Okay, you can include a question if you want. You can include multiple emails if you're sending it to one person, and then click send the test email. All right, and that'll let you see what it looks like. You can also do the preview. Okay, so you can just enter preview mode. And you'll be able to see, now you'll see that my footer went ahead and filled in with the year and my name and my address and all that kind of stuff. So it does fill in once you have the audience selected, but it lets you see what it looks like. You can also switch over to the mobile device and see what it's going to look like on a phone. So you see here where it was next to each other, now it's on top of each other. Same thing with my social icons, same thing with my footer. Okay, the things that I had side by side are now top and bottom. All right, any questions before we go on?
So I have a question here, and I'm actually going to address it for you, Jen.
Sure.
It's a question about using the scripture posters, similar to what you have on your letter there. Yeah. If the from the internet, if the site is visible on the picture. Wycliffe actually provides quite a few of these on Unity. If you go under our new resources, there are quite a few you can use there. You can grab ones from their Wycliffe Facebook site. Wycliffe USA, Wycliffe Australia, I think Wycliffe Canada as well. Often we'll post those. You can use those. I do not recommend grabbing random things from the internet because of copyright issues. So we do have ones provided through Wycliffe that you can use, or you can make your own. If you have a nice photo that you want to use as a background, you can put text over it in Canva or a photo software. But yeah, we don't promote grabbing things off the internet, even if they say free. They're still licensed to somebody, and you can get yourself in a lot of trouble if you're not careful.
Thank you, Michelle. So the last thing that we're going to show you today is how to send it. So once you've made all of your changes, we're going to send it out. To send it out, you scroll down. Well, you don't scroll down. You used to scroll down to the bottom to send them out. Now you find them at the top right-hand corner. So you'll see schedule and send. If I click send, it's immediately going to go out to everybody on my list. If I click schedule, it's going to let me choose the day and time that I'm going to send it out. Oh, are you not anymore? All right, they don't let you do that anymore. Okay. Never mind. If you have an account that was created before, you're able to still schedule your newsletters. It looks like they no longer let people with free accounts schedule them. So then that's just something that you want to keep in mind. There is research that shows that there are some days and times that are better than others to send out newsletters, that you're more likely to get more opens. And those are generally Tuesdays and Thursdays, either first thing in the morning, so 6 or 7 in the morning, or in the afternoon, which is about 12 o'clock. And the reason for that is or 12 or 1 o'clock. So what you're trying to do then is be on the top of people's email boxes when they come in for the morning or when they return from lunch. The reason it's Tuesday or Thursday is because Monday is the day of the week. People might be a little crabbier or stressed. Tuesday, things have calmed down a little bit. And then we're kind of avoiding Friday because Friday is last day of the week. People are kind of shut off for getting ready for their weekend. So Tuesdays and Thursdays that's why we choose those 2 days. Now that doesn't mean that it's going to be the best for you. Okay, so there are people who say, my church really needs it on this specific day, so I always send it out on that day. Or I noticed with my specific partners, I don't know, it works better on Thursday nights. Okay, so if you know your partners well and know that a different trend is going to work better for them, of course, feel free to do whatever is best for you. And some people don't want to worry about that, and they just send it as soon as it's ready. If you want to do that, that's fine as well. But that's how you send it out. I'm not going to click send because I have a bunch of fake email addresses on mine, and I think it'll make it angry. But that's all. That's what you do to send it out. So that's all the content that we have for today. We've set up a template. We showed you how to use that template to set up a campaign. And then we also talked about how to send it out. Next week is tips and tricks, and we're going to go over how to read the reports, what the reports mean, what those numbers mean, how I can use that to engage my partners better. So we'll go through all of that, and then we'll also go through some of the more advanced tools. So I will talk a little bit about how to turn your campaign into a template and some of the social media things and things like that. So hope to see you next week. Michelle will go ahead and put the survey into the chat window. Please go ahead and take that survey if you have a few moments. Otherwise, again, this will be sent out to you later this week or by the end of the week. Hopefully later today, but definitely by the end of the week. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. You're free to ask.
We have one you might want to keep on the recording, actually.
Okay.
Just because it's a refresher, because the Touchpoints newsletter went out yesterday talking about the domain authentication. Would you be willing to do a quick refresh on where people can find out if they've done that or not?
Yeah, we went over this during the first webinar last week. So you want to go to where your name is, go down to account. Also, the Touchpoint email has a video in that Touchpoint announcement that's going to show you exactly this as well. So go down to domains. So I went from settings to domains. And then you're going to scroll down and click, so mine's already authenticated. So let me disable it. When you scroll down, you'll see it's verified, and then you'll see authenticate off to the right. If you click authenticate, and then click authenticate domain. So you don't do anything up here. Click authenticate domain, and then it'll authenticate it for you. This is only going to work if you have Wycliffe or SIL email addresses. If you're using Gmail, Yahoo, AOL, those will not authenticate, okay? Because those are free email addresses. So I talked about that a lot in the first session last week. You cannot use a free one and have it authenticated, okay? But that's all there is to it.
Okay, we've got another question.
Sure.
We started to set up the MailChimp account before the first webinar, put Wycliffe in the organization name. Can we take it out or